Anyway, I could talk about this all day, but we have a fantastic guest to join us now. Here with us on weekends, we have Ronan Burtenshaw. He's the editor of Tribune, and will talk to us about, some of the parallels between Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, in the UK. Ronan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Nando, why don't you take the first question?
Well, I just want to very quickly, just because we were talking about Prop 22 and Tech Titans, Ronan's good friend, Nick Clegg, is actually one of the top executives at Facebook. Nick Clegg was the leader of the Lib Dems. It's just, the UK is not immune from all this at all.
Not at all. I wanted to chat about that a little bit, actually, because it's a really important question. Bogus self-employment, before we get into Corbyn and Bernie and all the rest of
I'd love that.
Depressing stories that we have to go through. Bogus self-employment is a really important question in the UK economy as well, all across the developed world. This is a tactic that they have used to push down wages, to attack trade unions. And you can see, the latest statistics from the UK are fascinating on this. Mark Harvey, a sociologist in Manchester, did a study, I think 2 years ago, that showed about 3/4 of those that were listed as self-employed in the UK economy were bogus self-employed. They were people who, we're talking about self-employed who don't have other employees. They're not businesses. The vast majority of their work is going to one company or a small number of companies within a single sector. And there's been this huge growth in the proportion of people who are self-employed within the economy since about the 1970s and 80s, when the great attack on labor really took hold across the West. And it's an important topic because when you look into how it happened, it was capital's solution to some of the frustrations that workers had in the post-war period, at the time of social democracy in Europe, and the relatively decent period that you had in the States. Workers had frustrations about their lack of freedom, their lack of power in the workplace. And obviously a big part of how the left provided answers to that was, well, we need unionization, we need workplace democracy, we need to empower workers, and so on. Capital's answer was, no, everyone can just be their own little capitalist. Everyone can be their, their own little business, who's going to be able to, make money and profit themselves, and you'll be totally free. Now you go and ask a gig economy worker in Deliveroo and Uber and all of these kind of companies how free they are, and they'll give you a very short, bloody answer. It has nothing really to do with freedom. The old kind of socialist quote, freedom for whom to do what, comes in here, because the truth of it is, it is presented to people as freedom insofar as like you're nominally free. You can go and, we don't have a contract and whatever, but actually, because you have to rent yourself to the people who own the capital, who own the economy effectively, you're not free. And what this means is that you don't even have the obligations from them that you would have had if you had a contract and you were an employee, and so on. So it's a massively important structural question that they've managed, like a trick that they've played on working people across the West. It's sad to see Prop 22 pass in the States, but I'm sure there'll be better organizing opportunities maybe when it's outside the den of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think you make such a great point there, because you're not truly free as a worker if you are basically functioning under the mercy of an app that you don't own, you don't control, and the terms are completely controlled by Silicon Valley. That's an issue. You can just get pushed off the app and you don't have any recourse. It's just an absolute disaster. And in America, the narrative of freedom and liberty is so intoxicating that it can be used in any propaganda campaign to push people to vote or act in a way that's not in their best interest. We're seeing it with the pandemic, where people have been propagandized to think that wearing a mask is violating their freedoms and their liberties. It's absolutely horrendous and terrifying that we're finding ourselves in this situation when it comes to labor rights. But what kind of action or what kind of organizing has taken place in the UK to kind of fight back against this?
I mean, there's a significant effort to try to organize gig economy workers. Fundamentally, the question for us is this, when it comes to freedom, in my view anyway. You've got to be able to argue with people what freedom really looks like, because people do want to have power in their workplace. They want to be able to make decisions where possible. They don't want to, be kind of yoked to the plow, as the old phrase was. And so you've got to be able to make the case that actually what you do with companies like Uber is you democratize them. And that means that you give workers who are in them the power to vote and to have, a say in the organization, the company, in much the same way as people feel that they have an inalienable right to vote in the political sphere. That you need to be able to democratize the economic one, much like the political one, at least to some extent, is democratized. And when you make that case and you say, well, the real way to freedom is not everyone becoming an individual, but all of us in a company being able to organize together to determine the conditions so that people are not left out, so that we have basic standards, so that a social floor is established. And of course, the only way to do that is through trade unions. And there have been efforts to organize gig economy workers, both within the kind of bigger trade unions and the GMB, the communication workers, Unite, and also some of the smaller ones, IWGB, UVW, and so on. And there have been degrees of success, but it's very, very difficult, because once you get the self-employment model over the line, you have all sorts of legislative problems with organizing trade unions. You have the real difficulty of the fact that people are atomized and they're not coming together necessarily in the one place. If people are not employees, they're much easier to drop, because all the company has to do, it doesn't have to sack them. It just has to stop. It just has to stop employing their labor. I mean, that's the fundamental question. How do you prevent a company from doing you in? And the answer is, if you're self-employed, it's extremely tough, because you can effectively be sacked without ever being fired at all. They just stop giving you hours.
Yeah, it's happening now with the WWE. Weirdly, there's organizing. And they could just drop them, like at the drop of a hat, as they say.